Eli Harper walked through the vast corridors of Aurelia Prime, feeling like a visitor in a world that was not meant for humans. The palace halls towered above him, walls shimmering with a subtle metallic glow that reflected soft, multicolored lights. He had been summoned for a diplomatic meeting, something about translating communications for the Xipherian Council, but he was late, and his mind raced as he tried to navigate the endless twisting paths. He paused at a doorway that opened into a large chamber. The door was slightly ajar and voices echoed faintly from inside. Eli assumed it was a waiting lounge for delegates. He stepped in quietly, expecting to see other human envoys sitting comfortably in chairs. The room fell silent. All eyes turned to him. Eli froze mid-step. The figures seated around the room were unlike anything he had ever seen. Tall, angular beings with elongated limbs, glowing eyes, and skin that shifted subtly in color. Their attention was piercing, and Eli realized with a sinking feeling that this was no ordinary lounge. The humans here were non-existent. He was alone among Xipherian nobility, and then he saw her. Queen Althea sat at the center of the chamber, on a throne that seemed to float slightly above the ground, her gaze fixed on him instantly. There was a calm authority in her eyes, but also curiosity, an emotion Eli did not expect from someone so feared. In his nervousness, Eli made the worst mistake imaginable. He walked past rows of empty chairs and took the seat immediately beside the queen, hoping to apologize and explain his mistake afterward. The queen's eyes widened slightly, and for a moment, Eli felt the weight of 1,000 judgments pressing down on him. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. Then something unexpected happened. The queen reached out and gently caught his hand. Her touch was firm but not unkind. Her voice, soft and commanding, whispered, "Stay, don't leave." Eli's heart raced. Every muscle in his body screamed to stand up, bow, or retreat. But the queen's hand remained in his, and something in her eyes told him that stepping away now would be the wrong choice. The chamber remained tense. Aliens murmured among themselves in a language that was impossible to understand without translation. Eli could feel their eyes studying him, measuring him, trying to understand why a human had the audacity to sit beside their queen. But she made no motion to stop him. Eli's mind raced. He tried to apologize again, this time quietly. I'm sorry, Your Majesty, I didn't mean." She raised a finger, silencing him instantly. "You are here," she said, her tone deliberate, "for a reason. Sit, learn, watch." Eli nodded, though he was unsure whether he was being polite or merely complying out of fear. He could not yet understand the gravity of what was happening. Humans had never been considered equals in the Galactic Council, let alone invited to sit beside a Xipherian ruler during an official gathering. The council resumed its debate, discussing reports of an approaching fleet of hostile alien ships from a neighboring system. Eli tried to follow, translating in his mind as best he could. The Xipherians were sophisticated and proud, relying heavily on technology and logic. They discussed strategies as though they were solving a puzzle, each suggestion precise and calculated. Eli realized that humans had never faced a situation quite like this. Humanity's history of improvisation and unpredictability seemed almost alien to the Council. He wondered how they would react if he offered a human perspective, even if it was out of place. Queen Althea's eyes returned to him, and he noticed something extraordinary. There was a spark in them, a subtle acknowledgement that she recognized something unique in him. It was not just politeness, it was trust, or perhaps curiosity. She seemed to sense that humanity could offer what her council could not: flexibility, intuition, and courage that defied calculation. Hours passed, and Eli slowly began to relax. The initial fear melted into fascination. He observed the council, their technology, and the subtle ways in which they interacted. Every gesture, every word carried weight. Every decision could shape the fate of countless worlds. Yet through it all, the queen remained aware of his presence. Occasionally, she would glance at him, offering a small, almost imperceptible nod, as though silently affirming that his attention mattered. Eli found himself drawn into the discussions, quietly noting points of interest, asking questions when allowed, and carefully observing the reactions of the council members. During a break, the queen spoke again. "You have a different way of seeing things," she said, her voice just above a whisper, yet clear. "It is valuable." Eli blinked in surprise. "I am just trying to understand, Your Majesty." "No," she said firmly, her eyes unwavering. "Humans think in ways others do not. That is why you are here. That is why you stayed in your seat." Her words sent a shiver down his spine. He had entered the chamber by mistake, yet somehow his presence had become important. The realization was both thrilling and terrifying. Later, when the council reconvened, news arrived of the hostile fleet's proximity. Sensors indicated that the ships were not just large, they were coordinated, efficient, and deadly. The Xipherians debated furiously, proposing solutions that relied on overwhelming firepower and rigid protocols. Eli listened, then hesitated before speaking. "Excuse me, Your Majesty," he said, his voice slightly trembling. "What if we consider an approach that isn't purely forceful, something unexpected?" The chamber fell silent. Alien eyes turned toward him, suspicion and surprise mixing in their expressions. Queen Althea, however, merely tilted her head, listening. "Explain," she commanded. Eli swallowed hard, aware that the weight of the room's judgment rested upon him. "Humans have faced stronger enemies with fewer resources. We rely on flexibility and improvisation. Instead of confronting the fleet head-on, perhaps we could mislead them, disrupt their formations, create confusion rather than destruction." Murmurs spread across the room. Some council members looked offended, others intrigued. Queen Althea studied him carefully, her gaze unwavering. "Interesting," she said finally. "You will provide your insights as we plan. Sit beside me and speak freely." Eli's pulse quickened. No human had ever been given such authority among the Xipherians. He realized that the Queen's earlier whisper, "Stay, don't leave," was not mere courtesy. She had seen potential in him, in humanity itself. For the next several hours, Eli worked alongside the Queen, analyzing data, suggesting strategies, and offering perspectives that alien logic had not considered. She listened attentively, occasionally nodding or asking questions that revealed her sharp mind and willingness to embrace ideas beyond her species, conventional thinking. By the time the council session ended, Eli felt exhausted yet exhilarated. He had entered the chamber by accident, and now he was a participant in decisions that could affect entire star systems. The Queen's hand still rested lightly on his, a gesture of quiet reassurance. "You have done well today," she whispered as the council dispersed. "Remember, humans often underestimate themselves. Others underestimate you too. Both are mistakes." Eli nodded, understanding more than she could know. He had entered a world that seemed alien, intimidating, and impossible to navigate. Yet through a simple choice, to stay in a seat meant for a ruler's confidant, he had become part of something far greater than he could have imagined. As he left the chamber, he looked back once. Queen Althea remained seated, observing the dispersing council, her expression unreadable but thoughtful. Eli understood that their encounter was only the beginning. Humanity had been given a chance, not because of strength or technology, but because of the qualities that made humans unpredictable: creativity, courage, and resilience. For the first time in his life, Eli felt that humans were not merely observers in the galaxy. They could be leaders, strategists, and partners in ways that even the most advanced species could not fully comprehend. And he knew that the coming days would test these abilities in ways he could not yet imagine. Outside the palace, Orcs Prime's twin suns glimmered across the metallic skyline. Ships moved silently through orbital ports, unaware of the small human who had just changed the perception of an entire council. Eli breathed deeply, steadying himself. He had no idea what challenges awaited, but he knew one thing clearly: he would not leave. He would stay, as the Queen had asked. And perhaps in staying, humanity's moment had quietly begun. The days that followed Eli's unexpected rise to prominence were unlike anything he had imagined. Orcs Prime was alive with activity. Ships buzzed through orbital ports, carrying diplomats, engineers, and soldiers. The palace corridors were crowded with aliens of every shape and size, each moving with a purpose Eli could barely comprehend. Yet through all the chaos, Queen Althea remained a constant presence. She moved with grace, commanding attention without raising her voice, and she made sure Eli was included in the discussions that mattered most. Eli found himself learning at a pace he had never known. The Xipherians' technology was astonishing: ships that could phase through space, weapons that could manipulate gravity, and communication systems faster than light itself. But even more impressive was the way the Queen understood strategy. She could see patterns in data that made other species tremble with fear, and she listened to him. That simple act of listening, of valuing his human perspective, gave Eli a confidence he had never felt before. One morning, the palace alert system blared. A holographic map flickered to life in the council chamber, showing the approaching fleet. Eli leaned forward, trying to make sense of the numbers. Hundreds of ships, organized in perfect formations, were closing in. The council erupted into debate immediately. Each suggestion was precise but rigid. Attack formations, energy shields, orbital bombardments. They all assumed that brute force and flawless execution would be enough to stop the enemy. Eli stayed quiet at first, absorbing the conversation. Then he spoke. "Your Majesty, may I suggest something different?" All eyes turned to him. Some council members raised their eyebrows in disbelief, while a few exchanged worried whispers. Queen Althea nodded, inviting him to continue. "What if," Eli said carefully, "we don't attack them directly? What if we mislead them, create confusion in their formations, and force them to make mistakes on their own?" The chamber went silent. He could feel the weight of judgment pressing down, but he refused to back down. Humans have survived overwhelming odds with limited resources. We've learned that creativity and unpredictability can be more powerful than sheer force. Perhaps we can use their technology against them without risking our entire fleet. Queen Althea studied him for a long moment, then she nodded slightly. "Explain your plan," she said. Eli drew a deep breath. "We can use their own communication system. Their fleet relies on synchronized commands. If we send false signals, they will attack each other, or at least become disorganized. While they are confused, we can position our ships strategically to neutralize the threat with minimal risk." The council murmured. One elder Xipherian leaned forward, his face glowing a faint red with indignation. "This is reckless. You suggest manipulating them rather than confronting them directly?" Eli nodded. "Yes, but consider the alternative. If we follow your standard protocols, we risk massive casualties. We must be unpredictable. That is how humans have survived against far superior opponents. It is not recklessness, it is adaptation." Queen Althea's expression remained unreadable. Then she did something extraordinary. She raised her hand, silencing the room. "We will follow this human's guidance," she said firmly. "For now, we will test his strategy." A ripple of shock passed through the council. Aliens whispered and shifted uneasily. Humans were rare in this galaxy, and their presence was often underestimated. But the Queen's decision left no room for argument. Eli's heart raced. He knew the stakes were immense. If he was wrong, countless lives would be lost. If he was right, they might survive, and humanity's reputation would rise in ways he had never imagined. Over the next few days, Eli worked closely with Queen Althea and the Xipherian engineers. They studied the enemy fleet's communication protocols, learning how their commands were transmitted across space. Eli suggested ways to mimic those signals, subtly altering the sequences to create confusion. The engineers were skeptical at first, but Eli explained each step carefully, using examples from human military history. One evening, after hours of planning, Eli and the Queen sat alone in the strategy room. The chamber was dimly lit, and the faint hum of the palace machinery filled the silence. "You have a different mind," Queen Althea said softly. "Your thoughts are not bound by rules, yet you see patterns we overlook. That is why I trust you." Eli felt a mixture of pride and anxiety. "I only hope my ideas work," he admitted. "If I fail, the fleet could destroy everything." She placed her hand lightly on his. "Then you will not fail. Humans endure, you adapt. That is why you are here." Her words were more than reassurance. They were recognition. Recognition that humanity had something unique to offer, something the galaxy had not yet appreciated. Eli felt a surge of determination. He would not let her down. The next day, the fleet arrived. From the observation decks of Orcs Prime, the ships appeared like a swarm of metallic stars, moving with terrifying precision. The Xipherian Navy prepared for conventional engagement, energy shields glowing, weapons charged. Eli's pulse quickened. He activated the communication systems, sending the carefully crafted signals into the enemy fleet. The effect was immediate. Ships began to maneuver erratically, turning away from formation, firing upon one another by mistake. Confusion spread like wildfire through the enemy ranks. Eli watched in awe as his plan unfolded exactly as he had predicted. Queen Althea stood beside him, her expression calm but intense. "It is working," she said. "Your intuition has saved us." The battle continued for hours, but the tide had turned. The Zypherians moved strategically, exploiting gaps in the enemy's disorganized formation. Eli suggested minor adjustments in real time, guiding the fleet with precision. Every move showcased the combination of human ingenuity and Zypherian technology. Finally, the enemy fleet began to retreat. Ships that had once seemed unstoppable now fled in disarray, their commanders unable to regain control. The council erupted in cheers, though Eli remained focused, ensuring no vessel slipped past defenses. When the dust settled, Orlia Prime had survived. The Zypherians had minimal casualties, and the enemy fleet had been neutralized. Eli exhaled deeply, his body trembling from exhaustion. He had played a pivotal role in saving an entire civilization. Queen Althea approached him, her eyes reflecting both pride and something Eli could not quite name. "You stayed," she said, echoing the words that had first welcomed him. "You did not leave when others might have faltered. That is why humans endure. That is why you are important." Eli's heart swelled. It was not just praise, it was acknowledgement. Humans had always been underestimated in the galaxy, often seen as fragile, unpredictable, or insignificant. But in that moment, he realized that humanity's greatest strength lay in its resilience, creativity, and courage. The council formally recognized Eli as an advisor, a human whose perspective could no longer be ignored. Aliens who had once doubted him now approached, eager to learn from his insights. And though the victory had been immense, Eli knew that it was only the beginning. Queen Althea called him to a private chamber that evening. "The galaxy is changing," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "Other civilizations will notice humanity now. They will fear our alliance with you, but that fear is not weakness, it is opportunity. Together, we can guide Orlia Prime and humans alike toward a future where ingenuity is valued above power alone." Eli nodded, understanding the weight of her words. The battle had been won, but the war for recognition, influence, and survival across the stars was only beginning. He felt a sense of purpose he had never experienced. Humanity's role in the galaxy was no longer marginal. It was central, a spark of possibility in a vast and often indifferent universe. In the days that followed, Eli continued to work closely with the Queen and the Council. They refined defenses, developed new strategies, and shared insights across species. Humans, once dismissed as fragile and limited, were now being seen in a new light. Eli's presence was no longer accidental, it was essential. One night, as the twin suns of Orlia Prime dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the palace, Eli reflected on the journey so far. He had entered the chamber by mistake, had taken a seat without thinking, and yet, in that small act, he had discovered his place in the galaxy. He had learned that humans could contribute in ways that even the most advanced species could not predict. Queen Althea's words echoed in his mind. "Humans endure, you adapt. That is why you are here." He realized now that she had seen something fundamental about humanity, something that went beyond strength or technology. It was the ability to persevere, to think differently, and to remain steadfast in the face of overwhelming odds. Eli knew the challenges ahead would be greater. Other civilizations would watch, curious and wary, and new threats would arise. But for the first time, he felt confident that humanity could face them. They were no longer merely observers. They were participants, leaders, and innovators in the vast theater of the stars. And through it all, he would remain at the side of the Queen, not by accident, but because he had earned his place. The whisper that had begun it all, "Stay, don't leave," was now a promise, a guiding principle, and a reminder that sometimes staying put could change the course of history. Eli Harper looked out over the palace grounds, the lights of Orlia Prime twinkling like distant stars. The galaxy was vast, full of unknown dangers and unseen opportunities. But for the first time, he felt that humanity had a chance not just to survive, but to thrive. And he would ensure that when the next challenge came, humans would be ready, their courage, ingenuity, and spirit recognized by all who witnessed it. The victory against the rogue fleet had brought a fragile peace to Orlia Prime, but Eli Harper knew it was only temporary. Reports from distant sectors hinted at growing unrest. Civilizations that had long ignored humans were now watching them closely, wary of their newfound influence among the Zypherians. The galaxy was vast, unpredictable, and dangerous, and Eli could feel the weight of responsibility pressing on him more heavily than ever. Queen Althea summoned Eli to the council chambers before dawn. The room was bathed in the soft glow of Orlaia Prime's twin suns, rising slowly over the horizon. Her expression was serious, yet her eyes retained the calm clarity that had drawn him in from the very beginning. "There are rumors," she said, her voice quiet but steady. "Other systems are uniting, not just against threats, but in fear of us, of humanity. They see your methods, and they fear what they cannot predict. The time has come to act, not just to defend Orlaia Prime, but to show the galaxy what humans can accomplish." Eli swallowed, realizing the magnitude of her words. This was no longer about defending a single planet or fleet. It was about proving humanity's place in a universe that had long dismissed them. "What do you suggest, Your Majesty?" he asked, bracing himself for the answer. Althea's eyes softened slightly, as if acknowledging both the burden and the potential she was placing on him. "You will lead a small task force," she said. "Humans, Zypherians, and those willing to follow your strategy. You will move ahead of our main fleet, seek out the coalition forming in the outer systems, and prevent them from striking first. Success requires intellect, courage, and unpredictability, qualities humans possess in ways others do not." Eli felt a mix of fear and excitement. The stakes were higher than ever. One wrong move could ignite a war that would devastate multiple star systems, yet he also felt the same determination that had carried him through the previous crisis. Humanity had endured and adapted before. They could do it again. The task force was assembled quickly. Ships of various designs, sleek human vessels, towering Zypherian cruisers, and nimble alien scouts were grouped into a single fleet under Eli's command. The crew was skeptical at first, many wary of following the orders of a human they had once seen as an outsider. But the Queen's endorsement silenced most objections. Eli spent hours studying the intelligence gathered from distant systems. Patterns emerged. The coalition relied on rigid protocols, a shared communication network, and predictable formations. Eli realized that their strength was also their weakness. If the fleet could be disrupted, they would collapse before the main Zypherian forces even needed to intervene. He called his officers to the command deck. "We will not fight conventionally," he began. "Their technology is advanced, but it relies on synchronization. We can exploit that. By sending carefully crafted signals, we can disrupt their coordination. Confusion will be our ally, not weapons. When they turn on each other, we strike strategically, minimizing risk to our forces and civilians." The aliens in the room exchanged uneasy glances. Some muttered doubts, but Eli continued. "This is not reckless. It is calculated unpredictability. Humans survive by thinking differently. We improvise when others cannot. That is why I am here. That is why we can succeed." Queen Althea's voice echoed across the deck. "We trust you, Eli Harper. Lead, and humanity will follow with you." The fleet jumped to faster-than-light travel, moving silently through the void. Eli monitored communications, carefully sending the deceptive signals he had designed. For hours, nothing happened. Doubts crept in even for him. Then slowly the coalition fleet began to falter. Ships misfired, formations broke apart, and confusion spread like wildfire. Eli coordinated the task force with precision, using real-time adjustments and unconventional maneuvers. The coalition struggled to regain control. Their commanders were bewildered, unable to predict the humans' next move. Each tactical decision Eli made was a combination of logic and instinct, honed from centuries of human problem-solving and unpredictability. As the battle escalated, one of the Zypherian admirals approached Eli, visibly tense. "Are you certain this will work?" he demanded. Eli met his gaze steadily. "I cannot guarantee anything," he admitted, "but if we rely on predictability like they do, we will fail. Confusion is our weapon. Trust in it. Trust in us." The admiral hesitated, then nodded. "For the Queen's command, we follow." Hours turned into a day as the conflict unfolded. The coalition fleet, despite its size and technology, could not recover from the strategic disruptions. Ships collided, weapons misfired, and the task force moved with unmatched precision. Eli's combination of human intuition and alien technology turned the tide in a way no conventional strategy could have achieved. Finally, the coalition leaders surrendered, realizing that continued resistance would lead to total annihilation. Eli breathed a deep sigh of relief. The crisis was over. Oralia Prime and its allies were safe. Humanity had not only survived, they had led the galaxy's most advanced forces to victory through ingenuity alone. Back at Oralia Prime, the Council convened to debrief. Aliens who had once doubted humans now looked at Eli with a mixture of awe and respect. Queen Althea stood beside him, her expression both proud and thoughtful. "You have done more than I imagined," she said. "You have shown that humans are not merely participants in the galaxy, they are leaders, thinkers, and innovators. Your actions will be remembered." Eli felt a warmth in his chest, a recognition he had never experienced. For centuries, humans had been underestimated, dismissed as fragile and unimportant. Now, in the eyes of one of the galaxy's most powerful civilizations, and among the witnesses of countless species, humanity's potential was undeniable. The celebration that followed was grand, but measured. Eli spent the evening reflecting on the journey from a young linguist, accidentally taking a seat beside the Queen, to leading an interstellar task force to victory. He thought of the whispered words that had started it all: "Stay, don't leave." Those words had been simple, yet they had changed everything. The Queen approached him later when the halls were quiet. She placed her hand on his shoulder, a gesture of both reassurance and acknowledgement. "Eli Harper," she said, "you have not only stayed, but you have led. That is why you are important. That is why humanity is important. Others may doubt you, but remember this moment. Remember that courage, creativity, and perseverance can reshape destiny itself." Eli nodded, overwhelmed by the weight and significance of her words. "I will not forget, Your Majesty, and I will do everything I can to prove humanity is worthy of this trust." Althea smiled faintly. "That is all I ask. The galaxy watches, and you will lead the way." In the days that followed, Eli worked to solidify alliances, establish new protocols, and ensure that humans would be recognized not as weak outsiders, but as equals, capable of shaping galactic events. He trained human crews, integrated human strategies into Zypherian fleets, and began to build a foundation for a future where humans would no longer be underestimated. The galaxy was vast, full of challenges, dangers, and mysteries yet unseen. But humanity had proven one undeniable truth. When humans stayed, adapted, and used their unique creativity, they could achieve the impossible. Eli often thought back to the moment he had first sat beside the Queen, unaware of the consequences. That simple act of presence, of staying when others might have fled, had set a chain of events into motion. And now, as he looked out over Oralia Prime from the palace balcony, watching ships glide gracefully across the orbit, he understood something profound. Humanity's strength was not measured in numbers or raw power, but in courage, ingenuity, and the refusal to give up. Queen Althea joined him, gazing at the stars with him. "The galaxy is changing," she said softly, "and humans, they are changing it with us." Eli smiled, feeling the truth of her words. Together they had faced impossible odds, turned chaos into victory, and shown the galaxy that humans were more than capable of greatness. And though the stars stretched endlessly, full of unknown dangers, he knew humanity would endure. They would adapt. They would lead. And they would inspire others to rise alongside them. In that moment, with the Queen's hand lightly resting on his, Eli Harper felt the full weight and promise of humanity's future among the stars. The galaxy had been uncertain of them before, but now it would never doubt again. Humanity's journey had only just begun, and the seat beside the Queen, once taken by accident, had become a symbol of what humans could achieve when they dared to stay, to act, and to believe in themselves. And for Eli Harper, the whisper that had begun it all still echoed in his mind. "Stay, don't leave." Those words had carried him through fear, uncertainty, and danger, and they had revealed the incredible power of humanity. The galaxy would remember. Humanity would endure. And Eli Harper, a single human who once walked blindly into a chamber, had helped lead that transformation. The stars, vast and infinite, now seemed a little smaller, more welcoming, and full of possibility. For the first time, humans were not just surviving among the stars, they were shaping them.